Hey everybody, it's Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today I'm going to show you how you can paint this abstract waterfall step by step. I mean step by step in acrylic on canvas with an artist knife. And we do some brush work, but there's a lot of artist knife work, so if that's something you've wanted to know more about, we're going to get deep into that. On the mic is my husband John.
Hello.
So this is part of a 30-day painting program, and John helps me bring this to you guys by making sure that he shows up every day to help me get these videos recorded, and also to point the camera at the techniques I'm demonstrating, at the colors that I'm mixing, so you can really see what I'm doing. Now, in the description down below, I really like to do a fun thing. I hide information that you need, and that information is like the materials that I use, colors, tools, things like that. There's also a link to the website, theartsherpa.com. And over there, you can find more resources. You can find this video here and more like it, like 2000. You can also find a link to an art store, and that art store, our art store, has all these materials for sale. You don't have to get from there. It's just there if you want it. There's also a book, the Acrylic April book for 2023, and all the other years now, I think. And in that, you can find that on Amazon, but you can also find a link to that on the website. And that's the written out instructions to this. That's a resource. There's a school. You can find the school. If you're a person who needs to learn things sequentially and have kind of order, and you don't enjoy searching things online, man, it's just all there, one and done for you, which is a really great opportunity. But of course, these videos are just here, and you can just save the playlist. So it's what fits best for you is what I'm about. And there's an Acrylic April group. That's what's in the description. Don't I tell you a lot of stuff in the description? Totally worth opening up and checking it out. Hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss these, because we're doing these every single day for April 1st to April 30th. Now, breath in, breath out. I'm going to show you for real how to paint this. So open up that description I just mentioned, get those materials, come back and meet me at the easel right now, because I'm going to really, for real, show you how to paint this. Come on, let's go. So for today's lesson, I have an 8x8 surface. This is 8x8 square stretched canvas. I've got dioxazine purple, Mars black, phthalo green, phthalo blue. I have lemon yellow Hansa, cad yellow medium, cad red medium, burnt sienna. In the center, I have titanium white. Shall we throw up a step and get started? Okay, step one, we're going to very lightly sketch in. So this is a very abstracted landscape. It's somewhere between figurative abstract, abstract realism. It's kind of in there, but maybe pushed a little further into abstract. These spaces have a little bit of room, and I like to play in them. I'm going to get just my burnt sienna on a 1/2 inch angle, and I'm going to come in and kind of let myself know where my zones are. So I've got a bit of a waterfall that's here. So I'm going to sketch these two little lines down and kind of create a space where we know that the water could be coming down and falling out. That doesn't mean that there aren't other areas that are falling down and falling out. This just gives us some space. So it's a weird little almost clavicle bone. Then I'm going to come down here and let myself know that from this space coming down, I've got a little bit of a, we'll just call it an embankment, or that feeling of an embankment, and maybe a slightly shorter one over here. And these will kind of come back in their own way. That doesn't mean there won't be like little rocks that come forward or little spaces that jut out, but the values down here and kind of through here will be so dark that it's kind of not really something we have to be that concerned about. Now I'm going to put this to the side, and I'm going to get a hog bristle brush, and we're going to come back and I'm going to show you the next step. Back here, I'm going to put in sort of a misty, distant effect. I have the number 18 Raphael Artini brush. It's just that, remember, hog bright. And I'm going to come in and mix a smidge of my burnt sienna and my Mars black together, right? I'm going to wipe off any extra moisture on my paper towel, and I'm going to get just a bit of white. So it's really just a beige. Right? Nothing like the power of beige to talk about mist in the far horizon.
It's true.
And I'll paint that loosely across. It doesn't have to be super tidy initially. I just want a nice beige, because I'm going to use wet into wet techniques to sort of imply other elements here. Now, I can come in and add maybe a little more brown black and apply with just on the corner of my brush. Let's make little angled downward strokes. This could be distant embankments. Do you see how that kind of implies that something is back there that we can't really see particularly well, but we know it's there. I'm going to come over on the other side, maybe a little more burnt sienna and a little more black, just a little darker. And I'm going to make little curled kind of comma strokes, sort of creating a bush. Maybe I tap the little edge of the brush out to imply just little bits of branches and leaves that are in this misty mountain fog that we're looking at. It's not too bad, right?
No,
Just
not
something
at all.
to start with. And that's really what we're doing, is we're just creating something to start with. Now I'm going to come here with just a lot more white. And I'm going to come right there in the center and add that. And that's just more drama. You know, you don't want to underestimate the drama. I'm going to grab a little more black, brown, and I'm going to be coming in, just adding a little more color. Little bush edges. So that's the corner of the brush. And how this helps me get this is that because it's hog bristles, it's rough and it's scratchy, and the ends of them are split, which is what we call flagged. And then that really helps me get what I need to out of that. I'm going to continue on, adding a little more black into the color. You just make it a little bit richer.
I like the texture on this.
I do too. And I'm going to add just a smidge of maybe a slightly darker bush coming forward. So these are all pretty misty moments, right? We're not... And what makes them feel just sort of generally expressed is the value, the texture, and the way that there's not really defined hard edges. There we go. But that's all we want to, we don't need to say that much about back there. It's just a little far distant kind of implication of maybe landscape. So it's a little bit like what we do in landscape class, but we're just really expressing it. It's much looser for us. All right. Now let's go on to the next step, and I'm going to put in kind of a deep value here. And the reason I'm putting these deep values in is that I've got to get this in, and then I'm going to come back with some brighter stuff. I'm going to come in with a little bit of my Mars black. And I'm very roughly I don't have to be all the way to here because we have a misty moment there. Come across all the way here. Definitely that. Now, yeah, I'm going to have plants and interesting drippy things hanging down. I'm just creating the basis for where my knife work is going to be. And I will go ahead and pull this down a little bit to the side. And already I will come through here. Kind of back. See how it's a horizontal stroke? And let's rough in that side area. And notice I'm painting it in messy, aren't I? I'm not having to paint it in super tidy. I'm just creating that initial value.
I like all of this. This is it's very structural, while just sort of being paint on a canvas, it really looks like structure.
Well, and what is an interesting thing is that the modern movement and the abstract movement came back and influenced artists that painted things more representationally to maybe be less literal in their work. So right now we've got kind of a cow print going on the canvas, but that's exactly what we want. We're going to need to dry it for when we come back. So let's give it a good dry with a hairdryer, and when we come back, I will show you the next step. So we have a little bit of one color on this side, another color on this side. So I'm going to start over on this side. I'm going to take my phthalo blue and phthalo green, same brush, still the number Art 18, Artini Hog Bristle. And I'm going to really get this lemon yellow into it. It just is going to make it very, very luminous, which is what we're trying to do. We're going to come over here and brush over everything. This value. You can see why maybe I wanted some of this to be over white, because over the black it doesn't really cover. And there's an area that's very bright. So it'd be really challenging for me to get that back if I was looking to create some brightness. Coming in here. Now I'm going to come in with a darker version of the color, which is the phthalo green and phthalo blue. Right over the black. You could almost think of it as like glazing, can't you? The way that that goes in. Super, super intense. I'm going to scumble it this way, which is just sort of that rough scratching. All right, rinsing out very carefully. I mean, super carefully. I am going to pull all the moisture out of my brush with a towel. I'm going to take a little of my red over to my yellow. I'm going to add a little brown into it. And I can knock it back with a small amount of black, but I've got to be careful because it'll go green pretty quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and add this in. And it even comes over the black for a second. Coming forward, I will be a little more brown and black coming down. We've got just that starting architecture. Very blue-green on this side, this sort of neutral ochre on this other side. It's really nice, more like a raw sienna, but we're still getting there. Now we're going to dry everything, come back, and I'm going to show you how we start to really get this in here. Now I'm going to get into some knife work. That's how we're going to kind of abstract this up, and we're going to get some rough effects that feel a little like stone to us. I have two diamond heads here. I've got kind of like a teeny tiny one and a medium one. I like to have a few sizes. I got to clean that one up. But you know, if you've only got one, you can still do this. I do think it's nice to have a couple artist knives in your art studio, especially if you're doing any abstract. It kind of really helps. I'm going to start out with my larger diamond head, and I'm going to come in and grab my phthalo blue, some phthalo green, and a little white. Not a huge amount, but just some. We're going to come here, and these are going to be kind of at an angle, and we're going to pull down, right? Up here, I might straighten them out, but as they come in closer, they're a little pull down. You grab a bead on the right, and I'm not trying to paint thick here. That's not actually what we're trying to do. I might come in and get a little black and work it in. We are just getting in that texture, that effect that our knife gives us. I might come up here and kind of scrape down, and you can see it really does give you an effect that reminds you a bit of stone, doesn't it? And that's what I think makes it super fun. As I come in more towards, you know, maybe where the fall is, I get a little white on there. I might have to switch to my smaller knife. Pulling down a little bit. Let me come over to the top. I'm not using a tremendous amount of paint. I am trying to give the impression of rock work. Let's come over here and give some impression of rock work. You know, a little bit right there, kind of curving that in. It's scraping. Knife work can be a little intimidating at first. And what I want to say is that, you know, it really isn't as hard as it sometimes feels. I'm going to grab a little bit of that color that I mixed from earlier, that sienna. So if you remember, that's a little cad red and cad yellow, and it gives us this kind of interesting rust brown when we add the turquoise to it. And we're just going to come over to this side, adding that. If I get any white into it, it starts to pull its color up. See that? And working these together begins to pull the stone out of the background. So I do like to keep my knives clean, and I may pull this over. Now I've got some areas of smaller knife work here. Let's call this a new step, but we're going to keep on, just because I don't want you to get overwhelmed. All right, step 6. Let's get more detailed about it. So I'm going to take a little bit of my yellow and my red and some burnt sienna, like you do. A little more yellow. And a little white mixed into that. I've got 3 little bits. And I can kind of come here and start to scratch in stone. I'm loading a bead on the right and I'm pulling down, and I'm using a little scratching motion to kind of work these things together, which I really, really like. And it does give me this rough impressionistic sense of maybe stonework. You know, I can come in with like perhaps a little more yellow and add short little marks that imply faces of stones that might be turning. And that's really fun to do. I'll get into my light mix. I can come in on an edge. And just pulling that in. See how that gives that effect, that impression of maybe stone. If I want to come back, I can always come in a few places and edge in some black shadow. Come in an angle, change the directionality of a stone. Little wiggle mark, and that might be little short stones. And those are really just sort of defined by the fact that we have, I'm going to bring this down a little thicker and kind of worked down. I know I've got mist that I'm bringing up here, but I want to just kind of work that down. See how that then is pulling that stone perhaps a little bit down? I like that very much. Now, on occasion, I may need to put out a little more paint, even though I'm using thin scrapes of the palette knife, because I want to be able to dry it and mist over it and stuff like that and play back and forth with the two things. Sometimes you will have to, like, you know, spend a little extra time drawing or put out a little extra paint, but we're not really using that much. I'm going to come here and make sure that I get a little of my very luminous aqua color going. Quite luminous. And I'll want to pull in little, again, it's that same kind of little beadwork, isn't it? Going down, I can come back with a dark value, my dark turquoise. I'm just really doing a right load just because that's it's probably my hand's strongest bias. And come back over on this other side, kind of working in some blue-green, roughly scraped in on that stonework over there, and that creates, it really does create some sense of rock. I can come back with a little black and shade that up, can't I? Down here, a lot more white into this. Be a little more blue. I love this little knife. Pulling a little, maybe highlighted stone forward. And these stones over here, they're just much more blue-green, aren't they? Little highlights, and then where I want to make it dark again, I just come back with black and work those little ledges in. And if you look down here, I can actually blend with my knife. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Making that just a little fuzzier than you might expect just generally. Okay, let's call this a next step. I'm going to add a little more white into my turquoise color. And kind of like I'm doing here, I come along, maybe a lot more white. I'm going to work this along this little edge. And using the knife, kind of blend that in. And come in and get a lot more white on it. I'm going to take that white and work that in and blend that in. And that's my knife is very flat to the canvas, and I'm working it back and forth. It's like you're blending with your finger a little bit. Not bad, right? Fun stuff.
Not at all.
Okay, so we got to come over to this side, and we're doing something vaguely similar. I'm going to really wipe this off.
New
just
step
make sure
here?
we can even call it a new step. I'm going to come over to my little beigey color, which was my cad yellow, cad red, and burnt sienna. Get a little more yellow in there. And I'm going to start to kind of create a little misting effect that's happening here. I can even look at how I can kind of smudge these together and create this really soft transition. You don't think of that necessarily with knives, but it's really doable. Very much like that. Take a little bit of that yellow over to my black and get a lot more white. So it's kind of a gray mist through here. And then we're going to just, again, do that little wiggling blending technique that you can do. Pretty powerful. I'm going to left load, kind of come in here, maybe with a lighter value. And again, wiggle blend it in. It's easy for me to put these stones back in with my black paint. I'm going to left bead. That's the bead on the left side of the knife. It takes a little bit of courage to get here. I understand that, but I'm telling you, you can do it. And once you get confident with it, it's super fun. It really is super duper fun. Okay, we're going to dry everything, make sure our knives are clear when we come back. I'm going to show you what you're going to do next. Now, one of the big things with your waterfalls is that you really want to give the sense that water is falling vertically. And one of my tricks for doing that is I'll take a T-square and I will line it up on my canvas. Now I'm going to use a white Posca pen. This will get blended away, but this is going to make sure that I know where my line is on the waterfall. It'll blend all the way. I've got a lot of white that's coming down. It will vanish, but that line is going to help me not go diagonal, because it's in the diagonal that I'll lose it. It's not that sometimes the water doesn't get broken by rocks or things don't happen, but mostly you've got to really think about how it falls. Now I'm going to let my white kind of mix into some of my blue here. I'm using a number 10 Raphael round, and I'm going to come right here. Like, that's at the top. I'm going to make sure that I have a nice light beginning, and I'm going to begin to just pull down light little lines of water. And again, you know, you might have water that gets interfered with by a rock that comes down, and you can paint that down. It's just the general feeling of it, right? See how we're pulling that line down? If it comes off here,
It's really pretty.
we can pull it straight down, and maybe it goes down there.
Just sort of falls down.
We're just letting it fall down. Once we have it fall down, we can come in and highlight things and put in shadows, but it's just super important to get it started. I'm going to add a little more aqua into that, up into the water. Just because it's sort of nice. And then I can go right into like more white. Sort of dry brush that down at the top. Maybe a little light is there. The top of the waterfall. See, it's just one of the wonderful things about waterfalls, I think, in anything abstracted, is that they really do look like what they are. Look at that. It just makes you think of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know, you can have a super abstracted piece, and then still have it feel like it's like, oh, I know what that is. I know what that is. You know, and I come at the bottom maybe with some white, and I can kind of wiggle my brush back and forth even up over that space, and I'm kind of making a little bit of mist there, aren't I? Let's wiggle it again, a little whiter. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. And then I will pull some pure white kind of into that mist, connecting in. Maybe wipe this off a little bit and get some, you know, potentially whiter white that's perhaps coming up here. And I'm just wiggling this brush, right? I'm not painting clouds. I'm just wiggling it, kind of as a different layer of mist that's coming over everything. When we get the rocks in, it's so interesting because let's get a little bit of our aqua. We'll make some interesting aqua mist. A little of the yellow here, so it's luminous. It's light pressure, and I'm just kind of blending and scumbling that little side. And that's kind of creating a little glow, isn't it? All right. That is that step, and we already have something that feels waterfallish, don't we? We have a thing.
Oh, it really does.
Now let's absolutely dry this, and I'll come back and I'll show you what we do next. I am going to put out a little black paint and a little white paint because that's what we're going to go through the most on this particular piece. I may have to come back with a little bit of yellow. We'll see when we get there. And that is true. Like sometimes when you're doing knife stuff, that you'll need a little more paint than maybe you're wholly thrilled about. But really, honestly, it's not so much more than a regular painting. I think what I find is with palette knives, when I'm putting out what I expect to use, it is more. It's less than what I traditionally use in other ways. I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of my white and mix it into my aqua mix from earlier over here. And I'm going to do little downward, little pulls, like kind of in layers, trying to keep them as horizontal as possible at this stage. The kind of marks across. Come back with a little bit of white. Maybe get a little bit of the blue-green going again, darker version of the blue-green, right? Pulling that down, pulling that little water down. And I'm definitely kind of working it in to the canvas, if you'll notice. Sort of back and forth motion. Pretty easy to achieve. And that's just me making sure that I've got the canvas thoroughly covered. It doesn't actually take that much more paint than a brush, which is nice. Get a little more white. Kind of come back and forth. See how I'm wiggling it? Gives us a little bit of that feeling of water in motion. I really wipe off here. I'm going to come here and add some little rocks and stones and stuff to things. Because often on something like this, there is, you know, a rocky edge or stones or sides collapsing into the stream. I can go up too if I want. I'm just making sure that I sort of back and forth. That kind of gives that effect to that edge, doesn't it? It's too fun. Going back and forth. Really kind of edged in. Don't let it like frustrate you, right? It's just an abstract waterfall. So it's not like you're going to get in there and go, "Oh, I've done it terribly wrong. Let's call it a new step, but we don't need to dry yet." Now over here, I know I want these to be pretty rough and rocky, so I'm going to use my knife to exaggerate that deeply. This rock face comes up further. And just the act of using this black with the knife really helps it feel like a rocky edge, like where I need it to be sharp. You can see I can come back, and it does give it that feeling of, oh, I'm very much a ledge. The other nice thing is that, see, I'm coming kind of in and letting these embankments also sort of form there at the edge. When we come in and put a little bit of that small amounts of highlight, that will make those stones just pop and vibrate and become really a thing. Let's put out a little more black so we can get the other side. This is really coming in quickly. I'm loving today. So, you know, we're really exploring all the different types of abstract, right? And all the places that modern art has merged these different techniques and concepts, and, you know, and even though maybe we're not doing every single conceivable type of abstract this month, one for mess or just it's not feasible, like I'm not really going to do performance art. I'm going to go ahead and come up on an angle and kind of make it seem like there's, you see that sort of a shaly, rough area over there? I really like how it is to work these problems out on the canvas. Just something different than we usually do. Pulling that out along the side. We know we're going to have little stones and stuff out there, but pulling that out. Now this is a step. We don't want it to dry. When we come back, we're going to add some little highlights to some rocks here is what we're going to do. We can catch a little highlights of the rocks. Pull a little yellow, small amount of red for 12. Get a little brown into it. And let's come here and, you know, sort of sweep down maybe a little bit of that. And it's just a little bit of the stonework. And I can come back with the black and even blend back up in it. Adding a little white there. Just lightly touching. So those are like little ledges down the stones. Just, or something we know is happening out here, and that's kind of lovely for us. I am going to put out more yellow. I just need a little more yellow, but by not, you know, just hitting everything with it like constantly, it really, I'm not wasting it, so I'm okay with it. The dry that we do between these stones and the foliage is going to have to be pretty thorough, just to kind of let you guys get that into your mindset right now. Is like, oh, it's going to be pretty thorough. So I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of my yellow and my red. Little burnt sienna and maybe a smidge more yellow. You can see I mixed some white in there. We're going to come in and also highlight bits down the front of this series of rocks. You can see that just captures different ledges. I'm going to come back and kind of touch back and forth, make these are little different planes. I like to do that sometimes. I'm going to come in on a left load. Just pull that in there. So there's definitely some light and some stuff, and then we can always come along the edge and make sure that it's got a good shadow. This has to dry thoroughly before we can do any bushes or any foliage or anything else in this valley. So let's really dry it thoroughly, and come back. I'm going to show you how you put in the other part. So now I want to kind of come in and maybe imply some foliage, that maybe some hardy little plants that have survived these conditions. These are harsh conditions, right? This is an area that probably floods and probably, you know, has some stuff sort of go on. I just put a little black out, so I have it. I'm going to go ahead and take a small Artini brush. This is a number 4. And I'm going to come here and talk a little bit about maybe some of the foliage that could be here. Tapping up and down. That's in deep shadow. See how that would be in deep shadow? Some of this will get lost when we put the hanging vines, but it's nice to have it, and you really know it when you see it. You know what you're looking at and what it is. I'm going to take a little bit of my burnt sienna and my Mars black, and I'm going to come down here. Kind of imply a similar little growth or outcropping from here. That's a nice little shelf that comes out.
I like the trees just coming out of the.
That's what they're doing. They're just coming out. Grab a little of this. This is just a little brown. Trying to make irregular shapes. It's almost more interesting than clouds because, you know, trees just throw themselves where they have to get the light.
Yeah.
So they can bend into some really weird little forms to make an environment less hostile to them. Once I have that brown in, I'm going to take a little bit of my cad red and my cad yellow. I don't mind leaving it a little brown, right, from the earlier mix, but I just need some lighter color here. And we're going to find a slightly lighter value that might be existing out here. I'm going to add some to the tops there. So I'm leaving some shadow underneath. The light is coming in through this area. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dry this because I want to do some very vibrant and luminous and bright leaves that are kind of like getting hit by light. So I'll need to do that. And to do that, I need to dry it. I'm going to take a little of my cad red over to my cad yellow, and I'm going to make a very vibrant orange. I mean, like, right? Super vibrant. I'm going to touch little parts of this. Kind of talking about, oh, some sunlight might be catching you here. It might be catching you there. You can come back into the space. Now I can go even over into this lemon yellow, right? And white. So this would be very, very bright. these leaves are, you know, maybe getting hit by strong amounts of light. Now I'm going to come back into the cad yellow. I like it. Just talking about these little bushes. That's some nice light there.
Really is light. I like it.
This is kind of probably the hardest part of all of that is probably getting this in. But I think that that's quite lovely. I like that very much. I'm going to rinse it out and I'm going to grab a liner, as you do. A number 4 Raphael precision liner. I'm going to get it wet with a little bit of water and I'm going to thin my black paint. Add a little brown into it. And I'm going to add just some implications of some little twiggies. I like to, you know, try to make sure that I give it something that feels like, oh, that could have happened. Right? There we go. Just a little bit through there. Aren't they fun? Just little twigs. Okay, that's everything there. Let's dry it and I'll show you what you're going to do next. So we're into our last little run of things. I'm going to take my dioxazine purple and a smidge of my cad red and my 1/2 inch angle brush. And I'm going to pull down a hanging like little vine. It's a little challenging at first. And it's quite dark. So at first it's going to be hard to see. But the cad red to your eye will make it visible, even in the dark value, so it's worth doing. So this world has got this interesting little drop down foliage. Okay. As I go forward, I'm going to add a little more red to this and maybe even a little white. You can kind of see that coming in. I'm going to tip this forward for myself so I can, very difficult for me to see at its current angle. So I have to tip it forward a little bit. And I'm just looking for how I'm adding these values, right? Because I want this to feel like fairly healthy foliage. Gonna get a little Dox purple in there. Just make sure that that is nice and dark. Now, I'm going to switch over back to this little brush here. I'm going to take a little bit of my purple and a lot of my white. And I'm going to tap down a highlight. You see that little highlight?
Mm-hmm.
Pulling in that highlight. There we go. And it goes forward. You can see that I just use more of the light.
It's really nice. It creates this sort of, you're in this cozy little place looking out.
Well, that's what we want it to feel like, a cozy little place. So whether you're doing figurative abstract or you're doing abstractive realism or whatever it is in that world that you're doing, right? It always should play to the emotion. I'm just tapping this up and down, just speaking lightly to the foliage that's there. So you know it's dripping down. Isn't that wild? We're almost done. You know, we're just making sure that our little hanging vines have a little highlight and structure. Sometimes I have to rinse out my brush. To get a good effect. Now, a crazy thing I can do is I can come over here, lots of white into my purple, and then sometimes I can tone it with a little bit of the yellow. Come in and add a little light. Sort of like we did to those leaves. So see, that's like a little bit of light shining through. Feel like I got too much light there. Guess what? I just come back with my purple and trim it back. So I'm not stuck at any point with anything that I've done. Well, I very much enjoy that. That is super fun for me. And come through. I'm going to take a little bit of white on the toe of my brush. Just make sure that there's a lot of churny little water coming down. I like that. And I've got it. That is an abstract landscape waterfall. I mean, it is.
This is really awesome.
Just a trip.
Is this one that you hide your signature in it?
I don't think I really need to on this one, though. If I put it here, you're really going to see the signature. So it's kind of, you got to think about like, well, how am I going to sign it so it's not so overwhelming to the piece. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the purple. See if I can get away with doing this and not take over the whole piece. Look at that go. Look at us go. Look at what we did today. What a strange and wonderful place to go, right? Where we went to a strange and wonderful place and we saw a strange and wonderful waterfall, and there was a lot of really great colors. These aren't colors you get to see in nature. You might get to see these structures in nature, but you don't generally get to see the presentation of the color. And that's another reason why abstracting things like landscapes, from purely abstract landscapes, like it's an abstract but you somehow feel it's a landscape, to abstracting a landscape more from how you expect light and form to take function, it still pulls us into a really fun place. And that's why sometimes you'll see an artist who's painting something that you feel looks kind of like something going, well, it's an abstract. That's what they mean, is they've abstracted reality.
Right.
Right. And so there's a full range of these things that we have as artists. All right, guys, where do I hide things? The description down below. And in the description down below is a link to the website. And from the website, you can find the step-by-step book that goes with this. If having a book with step-by-step pictures and extra written instructions that match the video and the steps in the video is helpful, a lot of people think it is. Because when you get the book and you watch that, you can go back, and sometimes if the way I verbally explain it is hard, maybe the way I wrote it is more natural for you. And it's really nice to have that layered learning so that you can kind of discover that and let go of some of that worry. There's also a store, and you can buy art supplies that you saw here on the show today in the store if you want. And there's a link to the school. And if you like sequential learning, right? So there's that sequential learning. There's a group, Acrylic April on Facebook. Nice group on Facebook. A nice group on Facebook. Isn't that a crazy thing to say out loud?
So many.
But it's true. It's a nice group on Facebook, and it's a place you can share your Acrylic April daily painting journey. If you just came to do this one painting, you can share this in the Art Sherpa official group. You can share all 30 of these in the Art Sherpa official group. We let people share their tutorials into both groups because that's, totally fine. And, more than that, I want you guys to recognize that you can do this, and this stuff is fine, and it maybe palette knife seems intimidating or abstract painting seems intimidating, but it's actually just a super hoot, and it asks you to solve new questions. And I think that that's always good for us as artists. Now, I want you to be good to yourselves and good to each other, and I'll see you at an easel really soon. Bye-bye.